Good morning, journalism students. 2020 has been a year of so much history. You have had to live through so much history in the last 3 months. 2020 is only 5 months old. We still got 7 months left. But in those 5 months, so much has happened. From pandemics to social uprisings, there are so many stories to tell. Journalism as a concept, as we've discussed so many times in our class throughout the year, is about communicating stories. And we've often said at our class meetings that there are newspapers and news websites and news channels that'll tell the stories of America, of California, of Los Angeles, but that you're the only news organization that tells Bravo stories, that tells your stories. Your stories are history. So, in this time of great upheaval in society, great change in society, great crises all around us, we have a duty to history to document those occurrences, those events. I urge you to please, not necessarily for this class or for any class or for any grade, but for you and for your own personal history that you can then transmit to your family, your legacy. Document the events that are happening. Whether it's you're keeping a journal, whether you're recording the television for different clips and putting them together, not for something that you're going to turn in for class, something that you're going to keep for life. We're seeing so many things every day, important, monumental things that are happening. You're having to live through a lot of history. In 1992, when there was rioting after the horrible beating of Rodney King, it was May of that year, and I was a little older than you are. I was 18 years old, and it was my first year of college. I was at PCC, and I remember that time really well. It was the first time that something like that had, something like that terrible beating had been recorded. And we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have the internet. It's hard to imagine a world without those things, but that's how it was. And I remember I went to school, and the school had a big meeting at PCC. There was a classroom called the Forum, which is like a movie theater. It was my favorite classroom in the entire campus. And they called in all the students who wanted to come to this forum so that people could talk about what was going on. And I remember I went in there, it was so packed that there was no seats, so I just sat on the steps. And I listened to my fellow students talk about what was going on, um, and how that impacted them and how they felt about what was happening. Um, the neighborhood that I grew up in and that I lived in Um, it was an immigrant neighborhood. Um, I've always lived in an apartment building. Um, and everybody who lived in that apartment building was either an immigrant to California, like my family, or they were African American, like my neighbors. Um, and so I always kind of grew up in an America of that diversity in my local community. And it's easy when you're growing up and you're surrounded by that diversity to form the conception that our country is a country of diversity. And I grew up believing that. And when you look at history and you see how many different cultures have come to America and tried to make a different life here, like so many of our families did, um, you value. I mean, at least that's how I grew up. You value differences in people, um, and that this is a place where not everybody is going to look the same. But that's my experience growing up. But that's not everybody's experience. In some parts of this country, I mean, you don't, as a kid, I guess, I didn't really understand other parts of the country because I'd never been anywhere. I think the furthest we had ever gone when I was a kid was Disneyland or San Diego, and everything still kind of looked the same. Um, when you get older and you learn a little bit more, and you learn that there are parts of this country that don't look as diverse as Los Angeles looks, and that people don't have the same understanding that everybody who I grew up in the building did, um, you start to understand a little bit more about how some people perceive diversity and sameness. But anyway, um, when I was at the school, a lot of people were talking about what was going to happen. And I remember back then, the only way to call home, if you wanted to call home, you had to find a payphone that wasn't broken. And there was very rarely any payphones that weren't broken somehow. And you had to use change if you had any. I remember when a payphone went from costing 10 cents to costing 25 cents. So now you have to look for quarters instead of looking for dimes. Um, and then you would call home to make sure that everybody was all right. There's no way for my mom to contact me, and there's no way for me to contact her unless I did that. So after that meeting, I walked home. And when I got home, my mom had the television on, and you started seeing what was going on. Oh my gosh, we all got scared. We didn't know what was going to happen. Um, it was a monumental time. And, 28 years later, I still remember that. There's no way that when I was so young that I could have known what was going to come ahead. But the idea that we get to document for ourselves and for our own history, our family history, that we can then impart to our next generations how we're feeling, how we're doing, is something that's really important. So when I think about your documentary project, which is due this week, you get to document the history of what's happening to you so that that history doesn't get lost. You have it. Is very important, and it transforms from being a high school project into being a life project that you can then preserve the memory of events that are happening in your lives, in your family's lives, in the community's lives. So I urge you to please put as much of yourself as you can into this project. I also want to share this link with you. This is the Canopy site. It's part of the Los Angeles Public Library. So if you have a public library card, you get this free. And what is Canopy? Canopy is essentially like a Netflix for the library where you can stream movies for free. And I want to draw your attention to one specific section. And if you notice, they have a lot of different sections, right? It's Pride Month, so they have a whole section on that. It's, these are the ones that are trending, an immigration section, classic film section, um, credit-free viewing. So there's some courses that you'll see in online that just you get to watch movies for. Pioneering black filmmakers, award-winning filmmakers, but I want to focus specifically on a section called Social and Systemic Injustice that has a variety of documentaries on the history of race relations in America. And the first one on there is called I Am Not Your Negro, which is an adaptation of the final writings of the great James Baldwin, who died before he finished writing a book about the assassinations of three of his friends in the 60s. The gentlemen who had such an impact on society in their short lives, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He began writing the book, but he never finished it before his passing. And so this film, this documentary, attempts to give more depth, visual depth, to his final writings. And I urge you, if you can, to watch it. It's about an hour and a half long. It's completely free. So all you have to do is log in with your site. See, I'm logged in. They give you 9 movies that you can watch a month if you're like an adult. But when you're a student, I think you have unlimited. So I urge you to log in. If you don't have a library card, they're free. You can do it online. When I did it, it took like seconds. Well, maybe like about a minute and a half, because you had to type in your information. You give them your email address. Your email address becomes your ID. You give them the last 4 digits of your phone number becomes your password, and you can start streaming immediately to your device, whether it's a Chromebook, a laptop, a tablet, or even your phone. So I urge you to take some time and watch this important film that traces the evolution of race relations from the civil rights movement in the 1960s and before to the present Black Lives Matter movement. So it's worth your time, and it also has several other documentaries linked to it that show you more perspectives on several of the same concepts. So I hope you are safe. I hope you are well. Please stay safe. No matter what you do, please stay safe. Here are shout outs from last time. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Luz. Only assignment we have this week is for you to finish your documentary project. All your teachers are worried about you. All your teachers love you. All your teachers hope that you are safe no matter what you are doing. We urge you, all of us urge you, please stay safe.